Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks
The
so
end
much,
result.
Simon, for agreeing to have a chat today. And
My pleasure.
yes, thank you. So perhaps before introducing you officially with with your bio and starting the conversation, I'd like to give to those who are watching us live now, if anyone, or the recording later, give a little bit of a background how we met. So I met Simon at least 3 years ago. I think it was just before the pandemic, and I was a speaker for. I delivered an online webinar for the Change Management Institute. And as you find out soon, Simon, he works, in that space of change management as well. And that's how we met. Then as a follow-up, we got in touch and he recommended me to connect with Felipe Flores, who was running a meetup. And that's how I connected with Merv Hikok, who is a really key influential person from the Center of Digital AI Ethics. And yes, I'm very grateful. And we've been in touch since then and had a number of conversations when we were putting together the Mindful AI Manifesto a few years ago. And now we are reconnecting. So, Simon, let me read your bio
Thank you.
and then I'll hand over to you soon. So, Simon has a broad background in geoscience, economics, and philosophy. He has worked as an economist, financial modeler, and analytics professional across financial services and government in the UK and Australia, where he is at home leading technical teams and developing data intensive business solutions. As a qualified project and change manager, Simon enjoys finding solutions to some of the challenges faced by humans when interacting with technology. He brings a keen ethical approach to technology development. On the personal side, Simon has two kids, a boy and a girl, one in primary school and one transitioning to high school soon. So, without further ado, Simon, I'll hand over to you, and probably will be good for us to kick off with what mindful AI means to you. What comes to mind when you think of mindful artificial intelligence?
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. So what I think of when I think of mindful AI is the amount of time we spend on social media and primarily on our phones, because the entry point of choice now is a mobile phone. I think there are some statistics that say the average person spends about 5 hours a day on their phone or connected to digital technology in a way. So when I think of mindful AI, I think, is that a healthy balance? And should we be more aware of our use of these technologies and how we interface with them? So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of mindful AI. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And talking about the benefits, of course, the hot topic at the moment is really, ChatGPT. I
Mm.
think probably the most, the definitely the most popular hashtag at the moment. So we spoke the other day on the phone, and you were saying how you can see so many benefits, especially in the space of neurodiversity. So would you like to
Mm.
comment what's in your mind around that?
Yeah. A bit of background on me. I'm a dyslexic, so I've the blessing of not being able to read as well as a lot of people, but have the benefit of very broad conceptual thought. It's just the nature of the dyslexic mind and dyslexic thinking. I can provide a link to a good charity that looks into the benefits of dyslexia. They have worked with Microsoft and the Microsoft Accessibility team to develop learning programs that are being embedded in Microsoft technologies that interface to support neurodiverse people and other sort of disability awareness pieces within technology. I see AI and GPT chat being a massive benefit for people who are neurodiverse or have some form of physical disability where they find it hard to interface with technology. So it's not to be underestimated how beneficial something like ChatGPT and other AI-based technologies are, and the benefits they are bringing to huge sections of society that wouldn't otherwise be supported and may be isolated. So it's as a tool for enhancing our connectivity, it is massive and it is game-changing, and in a positive way, I would put that as well.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. A number of things comes to mind. So I remember when we were talking at regular basis, you know, in 2020, when we put together the Mindful AI Manifesto website, and you know, we identified some of the initiatives and was stating our purpose, our values. I remember that one thing that was top of mind for you was you know, concerns around being a father, you know, and social media, and the risks around misuse of personal information, and so on. So where are you now with those concerns?
It is alarming how much we sign away in terms of our data and what we allow to be tracked. I think going to the most recent examples of it, obviously TikTok is a big sort of geopolitical flag at the moment. It comes down to what you would call tech nationalism, or an authoritarian government. Is it controlling TikTok versus free and democratic society? Can we post what we want on the internet? So we get to post what we want, but do we then trade off surveillance and surveillance society, which is a very authoritarian approach? There are deep concerns about being surveilled. I would say they are well-founded, not necessarily only to TikTok, but I would say it goes back to, if we look back in 2012, I think it was, with Cambridge Analytica and the work they were doing with Facebook to run unsanctioned psychological experiments on some Facebook users. So it's not necessarily an individual company, it's not necessarily an individual country who is to be sort of demonized through this. It's not by any means. It's just again a point to be mindful of, is that when we collect data, it could be used for good or it can be used for ill. And where we sit as a society in our willingness to accept that is a point of conversation, and something I feel we should do more of.
Thank you. Something that came to mind as you're talking was, you know, the point that Russell Stewart makes in his book about keeping humans in the loop. I don't know, that came to mind, but I'm just referring to my notes. So we spoke about you know, your view on ChatGPT, how you can definitely see that in a good light, of course, especially for those with you know, in the space of neurodiversity, with dyslexia, or perhaps, I don't know if there is any application to autism. That's something that I'll be interested in, because I have loved ones who are in the spectrum, as many of us does have. And yeah, the Microsoft accessibility technology, that's something that I wanted to explore with you. And information networks. So I think we probably won't have time to cover that topic today, but would you like to give a little bit of a hint in kind of as a heads up for a future conversation between me and you?
Yeah, in terms of there's so much to it.
Where to start, right?
Where to start? Yeah. I think I've touched on the tech nationalism. I mentioned, I think I mentioned we we have to look at risks and issues now. We are in a position where we're facing issues with AI. They've already been realized. I think a lot has come out around ChatGPT and the Future of Life Institute has headed by Max Tegmark. I think we posted something on him and the ask for a pause in creation of LLMs, so large language models, so the technology that is behind ChatGPT. So effectively training a model on the internet and all information that you can get your hands on, and then feeding it back through neural networks. I think there was a case of, and excuse me if I'm going off topic a bit, but there was a
Please do.
Case of a Google, there was a case of a Google employee being fooled by AI and coming out and saying this is a cognizant being, and I believe it is alive. I'm of the opinion they're not. I think we are in a position where a specific field of AI called the theory of mind AI that is regarded as a step before super intelligence and general intelligence, or general intelligence then super intelligence. It's when AI can think as a human thinks, then it has reached super or general intelligence. I don't believe we're there, and I don't think our current technologies will get us there. I think we're looking at very smart processing, so end-to-end processing. And the way I say that is, if you think of the physiology of the mind is equivalent to a neural network, but it lacks all neurochemistry. There is zero neurochemistry in an AI model. And I think that's an important distinction to come across, is where do our emotions come from? They're a combination of our thoughts and a chemical reaction in our mind. That is very different to an AI. There are some who are saying maybe there are silicon-based systems for this, but no, we've taught the AI everything it knows, and it is limited by our capability to understand. It has not jumped over to being intelligent yet, as far as we know, and I don't think that's going to happen for a long time.
Well, I wish Andy was here. I cannot actually, I still haven't figured out Andy Smith, who is our investor for Germany. Now, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago because he wrote an article probably 3 years ago about AGI, artificial general intelligence. General intelligence, yes, and consciousness, and exactly what you're saying now with neural networks. So we do have a replica with AI of the neural networks, but we don't have a replica of the neurochemicals that will be related to human values, which is what we really stand for here with the Mindful AI Manifesto. We don't know why, but we definitely advocate for human values to be embedded, taught to AI. So many things that you mentioned there, and might be good to emphasize that we will be updating the comments later with some of the points that Simon, so give some direction to anyone watching now live or the recording. So if you want to follow up some of those points, you can find out a bit more.
I didn't finish my point, and that's part of my dyslexia. I never finish a point. Is that I brought up risks and issues that we're facing, and I think we're in a position where we are being fooled by AI. It is known that we have political manipulation through AI. So once we enter into the field of psychology, we get psychological marketing and psychological political campaigning, highly targeted towards individuals that effectively gets what you would regard as either the best or the worst of marketing. So we play off people's fear and desire to market well to them. So if someone is very happy, they're not going to buy a product. If they're fearful of something, they'll probably buy it. Or if they really desire it, they'll buy it as well. So we start to enter into, and this has been covered extensively by, I'm trying to remember the name, he's a professor of law at Harvard, Yochai Bentler, I think. And I'll
the author of *Sapiens*? No,
he works on technology, basically the information era, what it means. He's an advocate for the Creative Commons and common knowledge. But then we enter into, if we can have access to all the information we want, what then, and it's free, then where do people go if they want to pay some money, or how does a company enter into that and or make money? And we look at the Google model. It's primarily marketing through its presence on the search engine. So hence Google is probably advocating for a pause in that, because there's a competitive power play. So OpenAI has a competitive advantage now, but they are going after a pretty much monopoly held by Google. So we get into the economics of power and the use of information there. Ultimately, it's what do you pay for? What do you get when you use an AI? Is it marketed content that was trying to tell you something, or is it something that you genuinely access for your benefit? It comes into the field again, as I say, of theory of mind AI and psychological manipulation, either for political or financial gain. And Benkler has a couple of books out. I'll make sure we add them to the chat as well. And he goes into a lot of detail around the economics and psychology of that. Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
So there are issues there as well, and so those risks, they've already been realized. They are issues that we have. They're not in the common domain, and this is part of why I think we should be mindful of our use of AI. It's because there are elements that are not well expressed and understood by the public, or many people who even implementing AI, and they don't understand those risks fully. So how do we get that information to the public domain so they can have a grown-up conversation about that?
Thank you. Two things that listening to you came to mind. One is actually, I wonder if I should actually test if I'm dyslexic as well, perhaps, because I didn't finish my point earlier around the time, AGI. So you said that, it's not going to happen anytime soon. You don't believe in that. And I wish Andy was here. And, I think the talk, before we're talking, 3-4 years ago when we were having meetings regularly, Simon, I think the predictions were around 20 years for AGI, roughly, maybe, in average. And I'm seeing some researchers talking about maybe it could be much less, it could be 5 years away, and we potentially run out of time. But you are not a believer, and I respect that. We can agree to disagree.
I think we can have very bad effects of our current use of technology and very, very advanced computer science, I would call our current AI. The theory of mind AI is where it really concerns me, the manipulation of individuals. What data we train large language models from? Do we limit code bias is a very good example of this. Facial recognition software was very poor at ethnic minority
You're talking about the documentary?
Yep. So the documentary there indicates that there is a bias towards within facial recognition software that means that European ethnics are more likely to have an accurate reading on facial recognition than other ethnicities. Because underlying that, the models were trained off white Europeans predominantly, with very few ethnic minorities in them. If you extrapolate that idea to a political viewpoint, so you would say, train an AI model to ignore one political viewpoint and push information. So it's a push-pull scenario. And if AI is pushing information onto us, then you can bias or you can negate certain arguments or weaken them by not having them in the data set to begin with. So by having poor data, poor representation on any matter that you have a political viewpoint on, then you can manipulate what is going into people's feeds, and then it becomes picked up by an influencer or a news media, and then pushed to your average user. So we pick up our mobile phone.
The filter bubble, right? That they talk about in the Social Dilemma, I think. Yeah.
So we have the filter bubble. It's unique to an individual. So our cookies are saved, our information
it's happening
is
already.
sent.
LinkedIn. Totally. Sorry to cut you off. I'm conscious of time. We have about 7 minutes. I'm conscious of that. And I remember the research, and I probably want to give you, a few minutes before we wrap up, to talk about what's next. But I remember when you were doing the research, Simon, how it really opened my eyes. When you put that pyramid diagram together. I don't know if you recall which one I'm referring to. With very extensive research you made, and the race for technology across few nations, because you're talking about before Google, and ChatGPT and Google versus OpenAI, the competition there, the race for arriving first, and there was also, of course, across nations.
So
which for me was a big eye opener.
They go by the stock market tickers on this one. It's BAT and FANG. So Tencent, well, BAT is Chinese-based, Bandu, Alibaba, and Tencent. And then we've got FANG, which was Facebook, Amazon, I forget as I go through Google. And so BAT and FANG was the BBC did a good article on that, and it's introducing who those main economic market players are across China and the US, and predominantly US dominating global sort of markets and marketplaces in free market. So we focus on sort of US-based companies rather than the Chinese-based companies, which is then the tech nationalism coming in and that geopolitics. Who do we want to buy from? There are benefits of cheaper labor force, cheaper methods of production. In China, more expensive in the US, but freer and more open markets and more competition rather than more of a controlled economy that is built up. So there's that bias, that question there on when we engage with our products. Ultimately, if we would say Alibaba or Amazon, are we willing to take a risk on potentially, to a Western mind, sort of items we would be uncomfortable with on a potentially human basis? Or are we happier with that than overpaying and feeding a wealth culture in the US of where billionaires will underpay workforce and some of the challenges we see coming out in the US? So that there is a balance to be struck, but that's part of it. We have some very powerful companies introducing AI and using it. What are we willing to accept when we are marketed to and the products we take?
I remember in the Social Dilemma, what was this name? Tristan, I think, saying if you don't pay, you are the product, right? That really stayed with me, being the key message. Okay, so I think it will be good. Probably people realize by the bio, the introduction, Simon. So Simon, it's not a machine learning expert. It's not as such, a data scientist, works in the data analytics space as I used to, but you're not a machine learning expert or so, but you have a personal interest in the area of artificial intelligence. Is that correct to say, Simon?
It is. So I'm not a machine learning coder. I don't build models. I have done econometric modeling, so statistical analysis of large data sets, but not through machine learning. Ultimately, it's pulling insights from it. Neural networks have gone far beyond what an individual can do. It's for a company, I can see the desire to get rid of sort of teams of analysts and introduce an AI that can do the same work. So that is where my interest came from initially. I'm working in a field where the technology is advancing very rapidly. How, as an employee, do I keep up with the latest technologies and make sure that I'm not irrelevant? And I think a lot of people feel that way when they hear of AI. Is my job safe? It's when you think of a value stream for a company, there are costs and income. If you're not in an income generating role, then it's probably an area where a company is looking to sort of make what savings they can. Do we remove all humans from that process, or what human element do we maintain as we integrate more AI into our companies? So what costs do we cut, and where do we keep people to ensure that we don't have the negative impacts of sort of non-thinking, non-emotional AI coming across? I mean, we could ignore entire swathes of a customer base because it's not a statistically significant group. We don't want to offer a service to them, but therefore we could alienate minorities within a company. And is that where we want our companies to go? So these are challenges. People are a cost. AI could save cost, potentially, but it could have the adverse effect of alienation of the company and alienation of our customer base. They're the kind of discussions I think it's important to have within our boardrooms.
Thanks, Simon. And on that note, I will start to wrap up and say thank you so much. First of all, thank you for being our ambassador, Australia. Thanks for making the time to have this conversation live here on LinkedIn. And we had a conversation with Andy Smith a few weeks ago. Next person that we're talking, it's Sofia Costava, who is one of our contributors here in Australia as well. And I know there are lots that you could talk about it, Simon, even going back to 2020 when we were meeting regularly, all the research that you did and your contribution. So I think I would just leave it, final words to you, whatever you want to share, maybe the last message. Perhaps why did you get involved with the Mindful AI Manifesto in the first place? What's your motivation to volunteering together with us? And perhaps maybe one or two topics that you would like to perhaps explore in future LinkedIn Lives here.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been a pleasure speaking. It's such a broad subject. AI is massive. So we're never going to answer everything all in one go. It is case specific. We need to look at what each individual person's interaction with it is, and make people aware of how they can assess that. I think of my children, and that's why I initially got involved in it. I think of making sure that I'm still relevant in the workplace, so I can sort of give my family a good life. I think of their use of technology, especially during the lockdowns, what was being pushed to them on social media and through gaming channels. Some of the graphics that we see coming through games now that are marketed to under 12s, so vulnerable groups are having psychological marketing put on them. I'm worried about that. And the perception for my daughter as well, with a society that is obsessed with appearance over substance. So we have AI filters for images used by many YouTubers that make, and there's pressure felt by especially female content creators, that they have to look perfect. And these AIs sort of take away a sense of self-worth and in how people look, purely for beauty filters. It's present on Instagram. I worry about that for my kids. So I think it's important to say, okay, we've got AI. How do we use it, and how do we make sure it's not having these negative impacts on wealth, on social, trying to keep up with a false world, and they worry me, and that's why I felt I would like to get involved in the Mindful AI Manifesto. I realize we're going a lot over time. I could talk more, but I
Beautiful way
think
to
of
close.
that. Yeah, how to look after your wealth, how to look after your family.
How to use AI and how to use AI
exactly.
wisely, mindfully and wisely.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Simon. Thanks so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye for now.
Ashley.
Cheers.